Thank you so much, Laurie and Professor Zimmer, for the super exciting conversation, which has highlighted the connections of knowledge networks with the place, with the local communities in Chicago and the world, the forefront of research and new knowledge areas. We are transitioning to our closing conversation today. We have a panel conversation on future partnerships. The GFCC, it's a global multi-stakeholder membership organization. We have members that are universities, corporations, government agencies, and private sector councils and industry bodies. 4 segments. And what we've been doing in some way really is to catalyze partnerships in that multi-global, multi-stakeholder global setting. Today, we have added and we introduced to you yesterday and today 3 new members. We have the Technology and Innovation Institute from Abu Dhabi joining as a sustaining member. We have the city of Porto Alegre in Brazil joining as a member, and we have the African Development Futures Group joining as a corporate member. So we keep on expanding this network. We keep on weaving new partnerships. I could hardly find someone, honestly, around the globe to talk about engagement and partnerships than Deborah Winston-Smith. Deborah will be leading this closing session, and I will briefly introduce our panelists here today. We have Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento, who is the Managing Director for the Directorate of Digitalization, Technology, and Agribusiness at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Bernardo, thank you so much for being here. We know it's late night in Vienna. We have Isabel Gil, one of our board members in the GFCC. Isabel is the rector of the Catholic University of Portugal. She's a change maker, someone who has been working not just at the university space, but also shaking and moving and changing institutions. Charles Kiefel is joining us from Melbourne, Australia, also a GFCC board member. Charles is a co-chair of the Australian Advisory Board on Technology and Health Competitiveness and a key leader helping us to further engage with Australia and around the globe, bringing a perspective on finance. Dimitris Lagoudas is a Senior Associate Vice Chancellor for Engineering Research, and he's the Deputy Director of Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station, TEAS, joining us from the United States. And finally, from Brazil, Dr. Pedro Vonchovski. Pedro is the chair of the board of Grupo Ultra, one of the leading Brazilian business groups and one of the key leaders working and moving forward CNIs, or the Brazilian National Industry Confederation, business mobilization for innovation. We have a quick vignette before we turn to the panel. Deborah, it's a pleasure to have you here again. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Let me welcome our distinguished group of panelists for this very exciting final session of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils Innovation Summit 2021. And Roberto, thank you again for your leadership. We've had 2 days of really stimulating discussions, and across all of our discussions, partnership has been the name of the game. And what we're going to talk about this afternoon with this distinguished group, and this evening and in the morning, given where we are around the world, is really how partnerships embed themselves and are imperative across all the 5 pillars of our Frame the Future initiative of the GFCC. Partnerships in innovation, partnerships in sustainability, partnerships in resiliency, partnerships for inclusivity, and partnerships for partnerships, all of which are advancing growth, prosperity, standard of living for all of our nations, for our regions, for our cities, and for us as individuals. Let me just highlight a few of the partnership arenas we've been discussing, and we're going to delve deeper in this discussion with these great leaders from countries around the world. One, we've been looking at partnerships across different sectors of the economy to solve problems and develop solutions. For example, a lot of discussion on sustainability of production and consumption and how to advance that. Partnerships are at the core. Partnerships between government and industry to develop the high risk, high cost, high potential technologies that are creating our future. Partnerships between business and education, business, universities, to ensure that workers have the skills they need to thrive in a rapidly changing economy, again, driven by exponential technology transformation. Partnerships that involve stakeholders, researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, governments, and institutions that connect them to create the innovation ecosystems that are essential to generate prosperity in a city, in a region, or in a country. And finally, partnerships among different disciplines to solve multidimensional problems, such as those that involve socio-technical systems, to innovate in transdisciplinary fields such as agro, energy, biotechnology, bioengineering, to create innovations at the intersection of disciplines such as biomanufacture, building materials, and biochips. And international partnerships to tackle and solve global grand challenges. We have seen how the scientific community around the world mobilized and collaborated to organize new research projects to unlock the COVID virus. They set up channels to share findings, develop new data models, develop tests and therapies using supercomputers, and they managed a successful global race for productions of safe, efficacious vaccines faster than have ever been accomplished in human history. Now, looking to the future, these complex challenges pose a myriad of opportunities to global economic and social stability. But they're threats also. How are we going to ensure an adequate food and clean water? The need for sustainable energy, protecting the natural habitat and its biodiversity, securing cyberspace as the digital and physical worlds have merged, as they have during this summit, strengthening supply chains for critical goods, and creating a more inclusive, participating economy and society. The more complex the challenges and innovative the solutions are, the greater need for partnerships and cross-sector collaboration. And we know that these global challenges and crises have always been what's propelled humankind forward across the millennium. And we have so many opportunities to be optimistic because these challenges have created a perfect storm for innovation and new value creation. And really, we need to look at these challenges and opportunities as a curve that will take us from often the current mindset of scarcity to one of abundance. But we know that no one country, no one company, no one single actor, discipline, or community can do it alone. So let me turn to our distinguished panelists and briefly introduce them. And then I have 3 questions that we're going to discuss in our time. And I want to first introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Isabel Capuela Gil. She's the rector of Catholic University of Portugal. She's also the president of the International Federation of Catholic Universities. She's a member of the board of the GFCC. She was appointed by His Holiness Pope Francis to serve on the Scientific Council of the Holy See's Higher Education Accreditation Agency. She's a tremendous author and a scholar, including work on the hazardous future, disaster, representation, and assessment of risk. Isabel, you should have been on the last panel too on resiliency. And she's a passionate advocate for international education. And I had the honor a few years ago to be at Boston College when Dr. Gill received an honorary doctorate and heard her inspiring remarks to the next generation of student leaders. My dear friend and colleague, Charles Kiefel, is the chairman of the Principles Fund Management in Australia. He's co-chair of the Australian Advisory Board on Technology and Health Competitiveness. He's a GFCC Distinguished Fellow and a member of its Board of Trustees. And Charles, being modest, I will say that you were really the instigator and founder of the Australian Advisory Board on Technology and Health Competitiveness. You have such a distinguished record of leadership in your country. You have been the chairman of the Military Superannuation and Benefits Board of Trustees. You have years of experience in the financial industry in London, New York, and Australia. And very importantly, in 2019, Charles was appointed as a member of the Order of Australia for his significant service to Australia-United States relations and philanthropy. And Charles, thank you for your leadership last year with Minister Greg Hunt of hosting the 2020 Global Innovation Summit with a focus on healthcare. We have also a good friend and colleague with us today, Dr. Dimitris Lagoudis, who's the Associate Vice Chancellor for Engineering Research at Texas A&M University. He's the Deputy Director of the Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station, which is world-renowned, and the Senior Associate Dean for Research at the College of Engineering. So he's merging all these complex interdisciplinary capabilities, but with engineering at the heart. Dimitris is an award-winning materials expert. He served as the chair of the Materials Science and Engineering Graduate Program, directed many centers on composite materials and multifunctional materials and structures. And his research team is recognized internationally in modeling and characterization of shape memories alloys. And yes, we're living in this merged digital physical world, but materials and material innovation have been a driver of competitiveness and innovation from the Stone Age and beyond. Let me also now introduce Dr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento. I hope I pronounced that right, Bernardo. You are the Managing Director of the United Nations UNIDO's Directorate of Digitization, Technology, and Agribusiness, and the Director of its Department of Digitization, Technology, and Innovation. You've also done tremendous work at the International Organization for Standardization. And at UNIDO, you've been leading work on quality and standards for trade facilitation, investment for sustainable development, and innovation in the context of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And you have had decades of international partnership and experience in global development in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And I know that the GFCC, I was very proud to sign an MOU with the former director of UNIDO, Dr. Kande Yumkela, who we all know today is one of our distinguished fellows in the GFCC. And then finally, we have Pedro Wojciechowski, a master and doctorate in engineering at the University of Sao Paulo and an associate researcher at the USP Center for Technology, Policy, and Management. And Pedro is an example of a very distinguished academic, a researcher, but he also serves on the board of some of Brazil's great enterprises, Ultrapar, and a member of one of the very, very advanced aerospace companies in the world, Embraer. Pedro serves on many leadership roles at the National Association for Research, Development, and Engineering of Innovative Companies, USP's Innovation Agency, very importantly, the National Scientific and Technological Development Fund. And I know you and your colleagues at the Confederation of Industry are working very hard to get more investment in Brazil in research and development. And you also have played a very important role in the WIPO Global Innovation Index work. So as you can see, we have a great panel with diverse expertise, but everyone here are leaders, and throughout their lives and careers, they have been champions of partnerships, but they've been builders of partnership. And so I'm going to start with this question, but please, and we'll kind of do it sequentially and then have a discussion and then move on to the next. But each one of you, if you could share perhaps in your own professional journeys and weave this in, what is the secret to creating the partnerships that you have found defining in advancing your business, your enterprise, or your country? And what is some of the secret sauce for forging such powerful, impactful partnerships? And I think I'll start with you, Isabel.
Thank you, Deborah. It's really a pleasure to be here once again. And I really hope that next year, once the pandemic turns endemic, that we can all meet in person. As far as partnerships are concerned, and my sector is academia, I would say there are three things that are key. One is to never be comfortable in your comfort zone. basically, to always be on the lookout for new opportunities. I think this is what universities are about. They are change makers, and success can at times be limiting to be able to transform the organization and adapt to the changing needs of the market and society. But I would say that the secret is, first and foremost, to create a network of trustworthy partners. So trust is absolutely of the essence. To be able to cherish connections with stakeholders in the market, with governments to secure consistent policies that do not last simply over one legislature, but that continue on. I think this is, for those of us living in democratic societies where there is a turnover of governments, extremely important. To have a robust economy and to have a robust scientific system, one requires consistent policies that do not change immediately once the government is a new government is elected. It is of the essence to create these trust networks. Only through trust can actually the flow of projects, ideas continue to flow between the different stakeholders, and hurdles and challenges that will always naturally appear. I mean, if they don't, that is also quite problematic. Solving problems can only occur if you have these channels open between the multiple parties involved. So, I said, trust is the most important thing. Never be comfortable in your comfort zone and be able to deal with multiple stakeholders. And finally, I would say to always be able to be critical about your own performance in the way you deal with those partners, and evaluate and adapt.
Thank you. And before I call on Bernardo, I'd like you to just share an example of an incredible partnership that you forged with the CEO of Amyris. You're a leader in the blue economy, and just a little bit about, the trust and how that happened, because in a way it was fortuitous, but it didn't happen through a lot of planning, but the trust seemed to be there from almost the beginning.
That's right. And it took plain talking, but it's a trilateral connection that brings together 3 or 4 of the countries represented here. So Portugal, the US, Brazil, and also Australia, because Amyris has plants in Brazil and Australia. So on a roadshow of the university to the US, to the California area, we presented some of our research centers, namely one of the top centers that the university has in biotech, to a leading global player in biotechnology, Amyris Inc. And as one of our strengths in this research center is, of course, circular economy and the valorization of waste streams to create new products, new molecules. Now, Amyris had a problem that they pitched to us. What could be done with the waste of fermentation? That they were using plants in Brazil to create a product for, fossil fuel, but also non-fossil fuel, clean fuel, and out of sugarcane and other products. And there was a lot of waste from the fermentation that they thought, what can we do with this? Can we create new products? And so our scientists, together with the scientists from Amyris, who created a joint project, a $42 million global project that brought our team, the team from the US and the team in Brazil, to create a platform for bioeconomy, creating new molecules and new products that are now revolutionizing, for instance, the cosmetic industry.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And we'll come back to some of these examples, but this one is really an example also of leadership and seizing the opportunity, which you did in your leadership role as rector. Bernardo, UNIDO is all about partnerships. It's all about bringing together diverse groups, countries to learn, but very importantly, training, but to advance economic development. And so, we'll talk about some specifics, but just in your career, you two are a partnership maven. And share with just anything you'd like to sort of set the stage on, your journey of collaboration and building partnerships.
Thank you so much, Deborah, to you, to Roberto, and for this opportunity to build back what we started with Candy. It was, and I visited Washington some time back, and I tried to rebuild our partnership. And yes, we would like to go back to that. And you mentioned a very key word for me in relation to partnership. It is a journey. Yeah, and partnership is not only the end result. Partnership is the process that leads to that, and this is fundamental. I think that we need to see, and Isabel mentioned, it's about trust, it's about transparency, it's about coming together. But we need to do the way together. Yeah, and when there is leadership, it is easier to do it. But in order to achieve that, we need the flexibility. Because there is always a situation where we need to give in, we need to find a middle way. So for me, it is fundamental to see this both, to see that in order to converge, in order to build consensus, we need to dialogue and we need to work together so that we really feel that we are moving along together along the same goals. And this is another aspect. A partnership needs purpose. Yeah, if you have clear purpose, you will grow together. Yeah, but ultimately it's about achieving impact, achieving results. But ultimately it's also that our work, our activity, our result, we need to have impact because we are in the development business. Development, as you said, is the business of building this international partnership. And this is fundamental. In UNIDO, we very much cherish precisely this notion because we work for industrial, sustainable, inclusive development. And more than ever, in order to build inclusiveness, you need to have this partnership dimension. We need to connect the dots. And it is about that. It's about connecting, but you can only connect if you have a very strong communication channel of communication. And we have seen, and we are presently today, yes, it's 11 past in Vienna, but this was such a good opportunity. We migrated into cyberspace, and suddenly this new dimension has opened a number of opportunities to better communicate, to better build in this let's hope we move to post-pandemic situation. We will have a new situation that communication will build these new partnerships. And maybe I leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to that. Charles, you and I forged a personal partnership when we met by chance some years ago at a conference where we were both speaking in Singapore, and you could say that the journey of the partnership continues, but you're a leader in the private sector. Your partnerships in the financial world are definitely ones that have a purpose and outcomes, but you're also a private sector leader in Australia that has been extremely successful in forging partnerships with your government to accomplish very important goals, such as the creation of the advisory committee, but also the superannuation funds and things. So if you could share a little bit about your partnership journey and also, some of the secrets of your very effective relationships and partnerships with the government, including, for instance, CSIRO and others that have made our competitiveness partnership so rich in Australia.
Thank you. Deborah, I must applaud you for your leadership, going all the way back to President Reagan's time when you worked as an undersecretary, I think, for technology there, and then you have come to be president of the GFCC, president of the US Council on Competitiveness, and have always shown initiative and encouraged me and our ministers, and they've taken on your advice. And we've created a joint venture strategic relationship, Australia with the United States, focusing on technology. But there's four main areas that we have. There's autonomy, which relates to robotics, advanced computing, digitization, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, healthcare, which is very important, genomics, for example, and also the fourth is access to finance and the development and encouragement of entrepreneurs and young people emerging in our society. And the CSIRO is a body in Australia that does research, and the government giving them a couple $2 billion a year to do research in technology. And the CSIRO have been a key part of the Australian group that meet with the US group, the US Council on Competitiveness Council, and their technology group. The US have, I think, Deborah, 40 technology leaders in a group, which have been operating for a long time, and it's a big benefit to the CSIRO to have the privilege to work closely with that technology group in the US. And there is no doubt that fruits will come out of this, inventions and hopefully commercialization of ideas. The CSIRO also have partners supported here with the superannuation funds. Now, superannuation is a word for pension funds, and there are 4 pension funds or superannuation funds that support the CSIRO's healthcare fund, and that's quite a lot of money has been put to that cause, and that's working very well. And the CSIRO have a link with CSL that are developing the vaccine with AstraZeneca, which is ready, and about 90% overall of Australians have now vaccinated with AstraZeneca, and Pfizer are now giving boosters. I had a booster a couple of days ago. That's my third. So these partners, whether they're super funds, the CSIRO, the Australian government, the Australian Advisory Board, which links with the US Competitiveness Council, and the GFCC. Australia is a member of the GFCC as well. So it's multifaceted and multi-players all working to the cause of excellence and trying to invent and develop technology that's very important in the world today.
Thank you, Charles. And, back to Isabel's initial comment about the importance of trust being the glue that both often starts and enables the partnerships to continue. It's very much at the heart of the Australia relationship in the GFCC through your leadership and with the US Council on Competitiveness. I'm going to come back to you, Dimitris, as an American at Texas A&M. But before I do that, I want to turn to Pedro, because, you're a distinguished engineer, a scientist, a great university, but you're also sitting on the boards of 2 of the major enterprises in Brazil, Embraer being a tremendously globally successful company. and you have the risk and governance and all those issues that require partnership and working together. So anything you want to set the stage on partnerships, and then I hope you'll talk about May, because the mobilization for innovation, the Confederation of Industry, is all about, you know, partnership and bringing together the enterprises in Brazil to really bring innovation to the heart of their business and economic success.
Thank you, Deborah. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I've known what you've done in the past, and it's an honor to be here with you today. The Brazilian industry faces a big challenge, a challenge basically to keep its industry competitive. So the issue of competitiveness is the main driver for the Brazilian industry. So we organized, with the full support of the Brazilian Confederation of Industry, let's say a platform called May, a platform in which we put together universities, research centers, the federal government, and private industry to discuss how to foster innovation in Brazil. Basically, the first thing was to convince companies and industries, including small and medium-sized enterprises, that innovation was key for its future. So there wouldn't be any future. There's no way to be competitive without innovating at the same time. So first we had to convince the Brazilian industry as a whole that innovation was key and that it shouldn't be treated as an issue managed by a manager or innovation manager or research and development manager, but that was a key issue, a strategy issue that should be handled by the board of directors of the companies themselves. So that was the first task, and we were able to do that. And the second was to basically tell government what to do. I mean, how to organize its laboratories, how to change the law in order to allow and facilitate the cooperation between industry and university, and how to finance private innovation, what kind of incentives, fiscal incentives, should be in place to incentivize companies to go after innovation, how to foster international cooperation, and so on. Brazil has to open its economy more than it is today in order to integrate Brazilian industry with the world, and we think that innovation is a key to do that. And finally, I think we found out that there is huge spare capacity in the Brazilian research centers and the Brazilian universities that should be put for the service of the development of the growth and for the increase of the competitive position of the country and of its industries. And basically, that's what we have done in the last couple of years. I would say very successfully so.
And, you know, maybe just comment briefly on, you know, Embraer has a whole network of partnerships in research and development. You know, I've had the opportunity to visit your headquarters in Sao Paulo, and you're using supercomputers, but you have a research capability in the US. What, as a board member, is the purpose of collaboration and extending the partnerships as important for a global company such as Embraer as it is for the other company on whose board you serve, that's perhaps not as well known, perhaps?
Yeah, well, actually, Embraer was created as a state-owned company and was linked to a school of aeronautics in São José dos Campos, in which it's still headquartered. And so the origin of the company, it to some extent, it was a kind of a startup born from a university center. And from that, so it maintained its links with research and development activities. And it has been therefore very innovative and has been in a position to be the market leader today let's say, up to 150 seat commercial airplane, and it was a very strong position also in executive aviation and in the defense area. And its main engineering activities are local, and it has several links to universities and research institutions all over the world. And it has been really a very successful company, both product-wise and recently also from a financial standpoint. So we're very proud of what we've done, and we still obviously have a lot of challenges in the future, which is basically what keeps the company alive.
And we need more Embraers coming through the May process. We'll come back to that. Dimitris, you know, we've been talking about trust and partnerships with purpose and engagement with industry and the diversity of relationships. You've been at the fulcrum at Texas A&M, one of our great engineering and agriculture and research universities, of forging major big industrial partnerships in your area of specialty, but in many others. So, you know, let's open up. After your comments, I want everybody to be thinking about, you know, the whole imperative for deeper collaboration between companies at all stages, great universities, but also states and regions that play a role as well.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. Again, it is an honor to be part of this panel, and thank you for your leadership all these years. I would echo basically what others have said. Isabel started. We have, first of all, to be resilient. This is not going to happen in one day. We have to work in these partnerships for many years and work on problems that are grand challenges for the global community, and also they bring global benefits. So everybody has a stake at that. In university collaborations, sometimes they become competitions to try to recruit students. So this is something that you have to realize, and you have to be a good partner and not the recipient only of resources or human capital. And of course, one has to invest resources, not just the dialogue. At some point, a partnership to support students, to support innovation, one needs to put resources. And for the long-term collaboration, education will be a necessary component of it. So graduate students or even undergraduates who will then go and work for Embraer, they will bring those bridges for many years to come. And the key highlight, and this I have taken this from our great friend Iyad Masad, you know him very well, Deborah, respect cultural norms. There is no way we could have done a partnership with Brazil. I have been going there for 30 years. And this partnership developed because of us going with respecting and trying to understand the culture when we bring the students before they visit Embraer or USP or other places, ITA. They understand the culture. We immerse them into maybe they spend a few weeks, they visit industry, they work on projects. And this respect of cultural norms is the key. When you go to Middle East, you have to understand the environment, Europe, Asia. And I want to bring an example of something that we're very proud of establishing with support from the US National Science Foundation. It was about 10 years ago. We're able to establish an International Materials Institute. So the idea, again, started from cultural interactions. For many centuries, thousands of years, Mediterranean was connecting civilizations. And it seems like recently it is dividing them. So we said, let's go back to this idea and bring all the countries that have access to Mediterranean Sea. So we went to all the Southern European countries, North Africa and Middle East, and we developed this Institute for Materials with a purpose. In that case, it was multifunctional materials for energy conversion. And it was a flat organization. 1 year we went to France, then to Morocco, and all the countries were working together, developed a network of laboratories. Students, for 5 years, it was an engine of innovation, and many of these collaborations are still active. So respect cultural norms is the key to trust and collaborations.
And you've played a very important role, and I've had the opportunity to see it in action. This very complex but exciting partnership you have with the Texas A&M campus in Qatar, and really working on some of the big, sustainability challenges. And that's, of course, navigating culture and the role of women and many other things. And your new president or Chancellor Kathy Banks has played a big role in that. So tell us a little bit more about that. And then I'm going to ask for a few questions from the digital audience, if I can get them.
You're right. A good example is the Texas A&M University campus in Qatar. It has engineering programs mostly, but it is a component, it's a part of the education city in Doha. So there you have to admit students, they are mostly local from the Qatar society, and they follow all the A&M traditions. But you have to do this in a way that there is meaning into this engineering education. And then, of course, you have to work on problems, water, they have natural gas, transition into energy sources, and solving problems related to civil infrastructure, because the country is building and growing very fast. And now we have several thousand students who graduated from this region, and they have become themselves the innovators. They have started their own companies. And this has also brought to us enrichment, because these students spend time at Texas A&M in the heart of Texas, and they bring their own cultural traditions, and we celebrate them, and that really forms these great partnerships.
Thank you. That's great. A number of the questions that are emerging, I'm going to bundle them together, and they interestingly relate to one of the goals and recommendations in the Frame the Future report. And that is really how the private sector, academia, civil can work together in partnership to advance critical legislative needs in respective countries. So passing legislation to promote more research, graduate fellowships, whatever it is, reform of intellectual property laws, antitrust, all of these things that enable or hinder innovation, require working with governments and passing legislation. So I want to ask you, Pedro, about the challenges of shaping legislation to advance innovation in Brazil. And then Bernardo, ask you, you're dealing with so many countries that are on the complete spectrum of development. How can you work with them in a way to understand that there's certain things they need to do in their government environment to spur their development without being prescriptive, as it were? So let's start with you on that, Pedro, and then turn to Bernardo.
Okay, I can give you some examples. According to the originally to the Brazilian law, it was very complicated for a full-time professor of a public university to collaborate with industry. He basically was allowed to teach, was allowed to do his own research, but he was not allowed actually to work with private industry or to devote part of his time to work with industry. So we had actually to change the law to allow that a certain percentage of the time, if even of a full-time member of a university, as a professor of university, that he could devote some time to work privately, using facilities of the university for the private industry and leaving some kind of an overhead for the university in exchange. Another quick example is regarding intellectual property. So some companies would only work with university if the final product or the final technology, the final process would belong to them. The intellectual property would be owned by the given industry, and the law didn't allow that. The university was forced to keep some kind of a percentage or to have a fee or royalties in the future if that technology would be actually used. So we changed that, and today it's simply a question of an agreement between the university, the professor, and the industry, and there's no, let's say, framework required for that. They do whatever they see fit. Just two examples of changes in the law that actually facilitated and allowed for an increase of the interaction between university and industry.
Thank you. And we'll come back to this issue around the flexibility and maturation needed in how intellectual property is managed in partnerships that have huge commercial implications. Bernardo, how do you deal with the issue of working with the countries that are very much part of UNIDO's base to help them understand the legislative changes they need, and then, you know, bring leaders together to affect such change?
Thank you. The way we look at it is we use the concept of good governance, which is a meta concept. And in good governance, we have to see you have policies on the one side, you have a regulation, and we include standards. You know, I come from standards,
Yes.
and I have been promoting very strongly the idea that standards can play a fundamental role as a complement to regulation. More and more in this accelerated process of technological transformation, technology is going much ahead of what the regulatory framework can go. And the issue is that regulation has to change. First of all, regulation needs to become more agile. We call the concept of agile regulation. In UNIDO, we have been utilizing the concept of technology foresight. So we use technology foresight to see where will be in the future the needs for regulation, so that regulation can cope with these developments. But we have seen also that there is an important need to have standards complementing these standards being built by consensus and partnership, mainly by the private sector. They can take also part of the job to good governance by defining certain guiding principles. And in this recent work we have done, we have defined guiding principles. And a bit not to be directive, what we do is we come up with guiding principles. In the case of digital transformation, it's all about interoperability on the one side, trustworthiness, but also it's about data privacy, safety and security, international collaboration, sustainability and inclusiveness. So we came up with the principles. We say the standard should embed these principles and the regulation should embed these principles. And certainly this goes also to the other level, which is policy. And now back to your concept of collaboration, the issue is that we are facing also a situation of complexity. So complexity needs collaboration. We need more collaborative solution, interministerial solution, policy. You cannot solve issues with industrial policy, with innovation policy, with trade policy, with environmental policy. You need to put everybody to work together, and you have to accept that collaboration also requires competition. Competition is a key ingredient, to move forward. And it has just to be in a balance with collaboration. And we know it from the cluster period where we have been dealing also in UNIDO so strongly with clusters. It is all about to find the right way to collaborate and compete in order to address complex problems. I leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, when you describe principles and standards, very much at the heart of what the GFCC is about, you know, sharing best practices, but every year releasing our global principles. This year they're mapped against the 5 pillars of Frame the Future. And intellectual property and its management and recognition and the importance of it has always been of importance because it drives investment. Investors are not going to put, you know, money in a new pharmaceutical potentially if they know that there's no protection of the intellectual property. But at the same time, as we're hearing from Pedro, and I know Dimitris and Isabel, you don't want it to be a barrier to collaboration. So this is a tight kind of walk of how to do that. In the United States, I'll just give one of my own examples. I played a leadership role in the legislation that was shaped in the mid-'80s, the Bayh-Dole Act and the Federal Tech Transfer Act, that for the first time enabled universities to own the intellectual property that came from federally funded research. And one of the great companies that came out of that was Genentech, because they were able to commercialize the Boyer-Cohen patent on gene splicing. But it also today acts as a barrier. And we have, we have about 8 minutes to go. And so I'm going to do 2 quick lightning rods, as it were. One is for each of you to talk about, just very quickly, an experience, or what do you see as a barrier to advancing partnerships? Because they're not all successful. We talked about trust, but we haven't talked about transparency. And I know in the financial world that Charles lives in, transparency is very, very important. So quick, what is a barrier? What's something that, did not enable success? And then be thinking about our wrap-up comments, each of you, on the next generation of partnerships, the power of partnerships for sustainable competitiveness. So anybody want to start on the barrier issue, something that didn't work?
One, Deborah, if I could just say, is security of ownership, intellectual property. We know what the Chinese have been doing, and it's very important that anybody who invests money, whether it's a super fund or an entrepreneur or a corporation, we've got very good partnerships with in Australia with Lockheed Martin, Boeing and John Deere, who are leaders in technology in the US, and they trust Australia. Australians trust them, and anything that's developed is secure in terms of its ownership.
Thank you. So the trust and transparency of security from an investor perspective enables these partnerships that advance business and the research agenda. Who wants to go next? Isabel.
Yeah, well, picking up on the same issue of IP, conflicting legislation, especially when you're working across different countries. Universities want to protect. I can fully understand Pedro's point, but universities also want to protect their IP. And while being flexible, these negotiations are have to be hard. I mean, that's part of the game, and it's part of the competition. Now, what is problematic is when you're working with conflicting legislation that will not allow the two players to go through with the agreement that they want to pursue. So I think this is something that needs really to be worked out, probably within the WTO. And in addition to this, of course, be very careful, no innocence when it comes to issues such as what Charles just referred to, China, and the lack of protection. And that is actually a denial of what collaborative science is. There is no protection for IP if when you present your work in China, it can simply be mimicked, and the products, there is absolutely no protection there. So this is a big hurdle to trust and to the possibility of being working consistently on a global scale.
Right. Dimitris.
Yes, what I was thinking in addition, my other thought is that as we go through IP, a secure data management system, for us, the universities, the major barrier is spending across boundaries, borders, is not easy. So we have research foundations like the Qatar National Research Fund, the National Science Foundation. In many countries, there is strong support for research, but then collaborations are not easy because the funding doesn't cross borders. If we find a way to solve this problem, I think we're going to see an explosion, exponential growth in collaborations.
But, following up on that, can an industrial partner in a collaboration provide resources that move globally or not if it's in the context of a university program?
Deborah, you read my mind. Yes. And an example, through Council on Competitiveness, we got closer to Lockheed Martin.
Yes.
It's a global manufacturer, innovator, and we just signed a major research agreement with them, with Keoki Jackson, key partner. And this is helping us because through Lockheed Martin, we can reach out to Australia, many countries. Yes.
Bernardo, anyone else on this topic of barriers of what doesn't work? Pedro first, and then we'll come to you, Bernardo.
I think I'll go back to the issue that Isabel raised in the very beginning, which is continuity. Most research and development projects are relatively long range. The most important, the breakthroughs and so on, typically you need support for, let's say, from 3 to 10 years. And in most places, most governments are not able to guarantee a long-term support scheme. So I think that's the financial resources should be there for the long term. In Brazil, I mean, any country with changing government every 4 years and with fiscal imbalances has definitely this problem. We have solved the issue here in the state of São Paulo, in which we receive the state funding board receives a certain percentage of the state income every year. So that's the state constitution states that. So that's a stable resource. As a consequence, the state of São Paulo supports research centers has a contract for somewhere between 10 and 12 years with guaranteed fixed support over a longer period of time. And that has made a big difference in the efficiency and the ability to actually produce meaningful results that are used by the Brazilian industry.
So the time horizons are absolutely critical, and different partners have different time horizons. Bernardo.
Yes, certainly. We talked about how to build partnerships, and the key ingredient to build the partnership is trust, but how we make partnerships sustainable. I fully agree with the issue of intellectual property, with property respect. We need reliability. You need to be reliable, and for that, I'm sorry, you need to comply with agreements. We have to have clarity of the agreements we have. And if there is no complete clarity of what to expect one each other, trust will not lead, will not solve. And so another element is we need very solid legal frameworks and very solid contracts which should be complied. This will also make that these partnerships become more sustainable.
Thank you. That's great. And it may be a note on which then I think we ran out of time in terms of quick going around, but I would love anybody to just jump in on the power of the GFCC to advance these partnerships, because you're all builders, you're creators, you're doers. And anybody want to jump in on what we're going to talk about next year when we meet in Greece, November 18th to 20th, on the power of partnerships?
One word, Deborah, consortia. That's the key word for us. We partner, we discuss IP, we put resources all together, and then we deliver solutions to problems.
That's great, because the GFCC is really a consortia too of like-minded, but different partners and organizations with common shared goals, but different goals too. And we're managing to add value to our respective worlds. So thank you. I had a wonderful panel. I think we could have gone on, but I thank each and every one of you, and wonderful to see you, and look forward to being together in person sooner than later. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Bye-bye.
Thank you to all.
Bye-bye.
See you.